Welcome to Lead Stronger Longer, the podcast where we dive into strategies, insights, and habits that help high performing leaders thrive in both work and life. I'm your host, Stephana Johnson, and today I am thrilled to introduce a powerhouse in leadership development and coaching, Maryam Marzara. With over a decade of experience guiding leaders to unlock their full potential, she has made an incredible impact on professionals at some of the world's most recognizable companies. Companies like Apple, NBCUniversal, the Walt Disney Company. And her work has spanned the globe, from Korea and Singapore to Canada, France, and the United States, helping leaders navigate challenges and elevate their performance. Her expertise is also backed by a very strong academic foundation. She holds her Master of Science in Organization Development from Pepperdine University's Graziadio School of Business. She's a certified proactive professional coactive coach. She is a professional certified coach through the International Coach Federation. She's got over 600 hours of coaching experience. Additionally, she brings deep insights into leadership growth as a certified practitioner of the Enneagram assessment and the Leadership Circle Profile 360-degree assessment. And I am very excited to talk to her about that. Well, today we are going to tap into Maryam's wealth of knowledge, discussing what it truly takes to lead with intention, to build resilience, and to unlock the best version of yourself as a leader. So let's dive in. Super excited to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we always love to start with your guiding, your North Star. We like to call it your mantra or your quote, whatever you like to call it. But that nugget, that piece that really tunes you in to where you're going. Do you have something to share for us?
Well, for me personally, I've been sitting a lot with this question of who is it that I'm becoming? And I think for me, why that's so important and why I encourage others to ask themselves that same question is because when we practice self-awareness and have a level of curiosity about who we are and how our upbringing has shaped who we are and all these life experiences has shaped who we are, where do we have choice? Where do we want to change? Because at the end of the day, we can rewrite what's happening in real time. And so that's why I keep asking myself, who is it that I'm becoming? I am under no obligation to stay the same person as I was yesterday. I'm also on a growth journey, just like everyone else is.
I love that. That's a lot. And it probably is why you love that self-awareness piece of the Enneagram tests or the 360-degree, really looking at the whole person, right? Well, let's find out more about your journey, your journey to becoming this high-performing leader. You're a coach to many high-performing leaders. What was a pivotal experience or maybe a turning point in your life that led to this expertise you now have?
I think back to my upbringing. I'm first generation American. I was raised by immigrant parents. And although, they were super progressive and very understanding, at the end of the day, their childhood experiences and my childhood experiences in the US were vastly different. And so being able to understand the power of perspective taking, and as much as we can empathize with one another, can we truly sit with another person's perspective with curiosity and not judgment? And I think that has become my superpower in the sense because it was so innately ingrained into who I was in very early developmental years of my life. And so I would say, without really knowing that was a pivotal point for me, it really became one. And the truth of the matter is, Stephana, the world is becoming more complex and nuanced. What we've learned the past 5 years alone, that we are all really interconnected more than we think we are. And the need for sound leadership is greater than ever before. How can we bring the human forward in leadership? Because ultimately, people want to follow people who can recognize, understand, empathize, and make sense of potential two polarities. How can we sit in the gray and make sense that two paradoxes can be true at the same time? And so when I think about just both my upbringing and then matching it with my professional career, I've had firsthand experience of the power of leadership coaching as someone who is receiving it and what it could do for me and my relationships, both professional and personal. And I wanted to be able to give that back. I think my life purpose is to help people be the best version of themselves. Because at the end of the day, I always say, no matter your title, we all put on pants the same way. Unless someone is putting on pants through their head, then I need to know about that magic trick. But we're all humans first, right? And so, how we show up at work and at home, yeah, while we can all compartmentalize to a certain extent, ultimately we're making sense of data and making decisions based on the lens that was created from life experiences.
Okay, this is amazing. I want to unpack some of these pieces. You
Sure.
said, I think you said true polarity. And then you said the two paradoxes and making sense of this. And I would really love to get something a little more tangible that we can sink our teeth into, the proverbial teeth, so that we can really understand this and take this away. Can you give us an example of how that shows up and how you've navigated it or how you helped a leader navigate that?
Yeah, I think, when if just basic terms, and then I'll expand from there. Ultimately, being a leader is indisputably hard because we are dealing with human beings who are complex and multifaceted. And so when we have to deliver potentially constructive feedback or deliver some really tough news, that in of itself makes it so hard because at the end of the day, the mind is saying, we need to make a business decision. And the heart is saying, this is really painful. So some of the polarities that I'm referring to is, can something be really painful and also necessary? Yes. It's not one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes, sure, context matters. Things can be mutually exclusive, but most of the friction point that we feel as human beings is when we're trying to make sense of both of them and that the both of them are polar opposites. Even for me, and I go back to my upbringing, I'm an American. I'm also of a child of immigrants from the Middle East. And so there's cultural nuances within me as well. I think about, there's a lot of research out there with a gentleman called Hofstede, and he does research on cultural dimensions. You know, my I shared my parents are from the Middle East and they come from a very collective culture. We make decisions on what's best for the family and the, quote unquote team. As Americans, we come from a very individualistic culture. What's best for me. And so for me to navigate those two polarities, I think is what I was referencing earlier on that helps me make sense of polar opposites. Can something be a need for the team and the business and also be a need for the individual? I think at times those are conflicting potential priorities. So how can we make the best decision considering both of those filters?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting to look at how, I mean, it comes back down to the leader would really have to understand themselves and understand what they value within themselves. Let's say if they're up against that, okay, they have something very challenging to communicate versus the bottom line. You were saying they're in their head about, okay, it's the bottom line. So at what stage, especially knowing that you have worked with the Apples and the Disneys and that we know that there's bottom line is the ultimate probably, right? Would you agree? And then because I haven't specifically worked with Apple, so I don't know if they do take into consideration the nuances And how does that look? And I'm wondering if this will bring us into these components specifically around the Enneagram and the testing that you do, and why is that so important? Because I know it's something that these organizations take advantage of, but are they actually using it? Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, ultimately, this is what I always say. We're in the business of integrating head and heart. If we completely abandon this quote unquote bottom line or business results, there is no business to run. And effectively, everyone would then be affected. Now, if we only tip the scale on that end and not consider the human beings that are executing on that strategy for the bottom line, then we would be just machines and not really honoring the human in one another. And I'm like I shared like early on in my career, I was with Apple and I owe it to my experience with them and how they taught me how to bring the human forward. I loved my experience with them and that shaped me into who I am today. And listen, no matter if you're a Fortune 100 company, you're a mom and pop shop, at the end of the day, when you're a business owner, that comes with a cost, and that cost is making tough decisions. And how do you slow down enough so that you're making the best sound decision, considering all the different factors, the human factor, the business factor, and still doing something while respecting the other person or the other group of people with dignity and grace, and also making sure that, if we take the analogy of a bank account, we're not over withdrawing. We're not in the negatives, right? We have to make some tough decisions and activate our head, but let's not forget about activating our heart too. And I owe that a lot to my early career and experiences with companies like Apple who taught me these valuable experiences, particularly with leaders at these organizations that taught me that. And I think that was going back to what you asked earlier, that was kind of a turning point of understanding like, wow, this is incredible that a leader can help me develop this perspective. So much, in fact, that I still keep in touch with some of them because they've helped me formulate and bring forward and, give back to the community in this way.
Yeah, I think that's super valuable, and I think so good to hear that is something that is leaned into, and clearly it made an impact on you, and now here you are bringing this to the world. When did you discover the Enneagram, the 360 degree? At what point did you bring that on? And then how did you implement that? And with that, when you start working with an organization, is that the very first process? Can you unpack that?
Yeah, of course. So I always knew about assessments. I think early on, again in my career, I was fascinated with the human dynamics of it all. And I knew about Enneagram, but it wasn't until I think, I actually don't know, probably like a few years ago, let's say, where I decided I'm actually going to go and get accredited in this because I think that with that knowledge, I can add another level of self-awareness to my clients. So I really did it in service of being able to do it for the person I'm speaking to, the leader, the team I'm speaking with. Enneagram, what I appreciate about it is that if you picture the analogy of an iceberg, what's above ocean water are visible personality characteristics. What's below the ocean water is what is this person fearful of? What motivates them? And the Enneagram measures that core motivation that's below the surface level of the water. And so when I think about transformational change versus transactional, it's really getting to the root cause of, you may have done X, Y, and Z as a behavior, but what drove that behavior? What motivated you? What were you fearing in that moment? And when we begin to put a spotlight on motivations and fears, we give ourselves and one another the opportunity to ask, Is this serving me behaving in this way? Is this serving me to enroll myself, to continue to enroll myself in this limited belief? And if it's not, what do I need to change? I think early on in the call, I said, who is it that I'm becoming? This is an example of that. I have no obligation to stay the same, but it isn't until we unpack the awareness of it all that it really doesn't become transformational until then.
Yeah, that's something that I have found a challenge with those that I've worked with that don't want to change, right? That it's very scary. And so they'll lean back into their old ways. And one of the things that you had mentioned in terms of unpacking this, the complexity and the nuances, I'm wondering, I'm like, just my personal opinion is that there's a lot of excuse in that. And as a coach, I mean, you have to stand really firm in what you're here to help them see, yet maybe they don't want to see it. How do you address that specifically? And are you doing it in a way by training them, or are you allowing for them to unfold and get to the point where they can say, okay, yeah, maybe I was wrong, or maybe I can do this differently, or right? Because oftentimes what I see, honestly, is that leaders are pointing the finger, right? Go fix my leadership team, go fix this or the, right? And it's ultimately within themselves. Do you find that? And then how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think being resistant to change and constructive feedback is part of the human dynamic. This is, part of my discussions with leaders is helping them understand not only, yes, we'll resist the feedback or change, but why do we resist the feedback and change? Our brains are hardwired for pleasure and comfort. And so when something is contradictory to that, a part of our brain will get triggered that is really there for preserving safety, preserving this pleasure and comfort principle. But the thing is, that part of the brain can't decipher between physical safety or emotional safety. So it triggers this fight or flight. And so when we can wrap our heads, I guess pun intended, if we can wrap our heads around the totality of what it means to be a human being, I think we can empathize with one another that, of course, we're going to resist some of this. And that's okay. And not only is that okay, is it getting you closer to what you want? And I think we have to get really clear with ourselves and with one another about what is it that I want? And if I'm, like you said, pointing the fingers at this person and that person, has that strategy served me? And if it hasn't, Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So it requires us to be able to have a mirror up. And sometimes coaching is that, articulating what's going on and asking them, how is this serving you? But I think what I want to make clear is that the very first thing I said without saying it is that I don't use shame as a tactic to get people to change because I believe that we cannot shame ourselves into change. We have to hold a level of compassion for ourselves and understand, okay, well, if my brain is hardwired this way, and, there's things about my own narrative that have led me to believe and enroll in these perspectives. And I've made sense of these. I always say, it is what it is. Now what? Now what do I want to do with this data? And do I have choice? Absolutely.
Yeah, that is. I mean, everything you're saying specifically is what a well-trained coach is competent in, and I love how you unpack that. And I think if anyone has not had a coach at this point in their life, as a business owner, as a leader, this is definitely the time to consider it, right? So you said, I'm here to lead to essentially help others become the best version of themselves. And in doing that, there's all nuances there as well, right? That's one person's version is not another person's version. And how do you identify that? So, in creating your impact that you hope to leave in the world, how do you actually tangibly see that? Is there some way that you can tangibly see these coaching results?
Yeah, I mean, it's a variety of different tools that I use. We spoke about one, the Enneagram. Enneagram, what the word essentially means Enneagram means nine, gram means picture. The assessment gives you a core type number that you have have a strong preference for. It's one of the nine, but another reason why I love the assessment is because it showcases that we've got all nine numbers within us to varying degrees. Some that, we haven't used that is an opportunity for us to call upon, and some that we've relied on a little too heavily. So maybe I need to, bring it back a little bit. Excuse me. And so there's that as a way to honor someone's self. Your question about if I'm helping people be the best version of themselves and everyone's different, well, that's one tool. Another tool is helping individuals, teams, again, organizations identify what are their core values, what lights them up. Because while we might have similar values, there's ones that we maybe feel more strongly about. And when we honor them, we are led to leading more fulfilling lives. And so, really identifying the person for who they are and not who they need to be, but who they are today. And what are their values? Have they been honoring them or not? That's one way. The Enneagram's another way. And then there's a variety of different other ways that I use. Like we briefly touched on the 360 earlier. Part of my debrief of using that is tell me a little bit about your life, even outside of your title, and help me understand a little bit about your life experiences. Because to your point, we're all different.
Yeah, very good. So, if you were to look at what overall, what's the most important lesson you've learned about for yourself, to reflect for yourself as well, but then also if you can give us insight on someone that you've worked with and a lesson that you've learned around sustaining this concept, this, and I'll say resilience, because that ability to stay curious, to stay interested in what is there, as opposed to what I have to be doing. I love that. I love how you brought that together. So, can you give us maybe a lesson? What's the most important thing you've learned on that? And
Yeah, I would say that, every new life stage is going to demand us a slightly different version of ourselves. So when you think about the different chapters in your life, whether it be personal or professional, context matters. The people may be slightly adjusted. The environment may be a different time of place in the world, right? Just 5 years ago, we were all in a pandemic. That context matters. And so to be able to stay curious and grounded and compassionate requires us to also be highly vigilant about what is here and now. And what is it that I want here and now? And what's the next best foot forward to take? I think sometimes when we may paralyze ourselves if we think that we constantly need to evolve and change. I'm a big proponent of that. And there's a specialty to this individual that serves them well today. And how can you honor that? I think it takes a lot of courage for someone to be really celebratory of their own superpowers. We don't teach one another how to do that. And I think that in of itself sometimes could be an act of courage.
yeah, as I'm hearing you unpack all these pieces, and we have a very similar mindset with regards to holistic really looking at the whole person. And my belief with regards to leaders is that ultimately we need our leaders to be in the most whole way that they can be, which does mean that today they may not be where they're going to be a year from now. No, we're not going to be. So and in that, going back to your juxtaposition of you called it polarity, you said, okay, the paradox of, okay, in order for me to grow this company to a multi-billion-dollar company, even though I'm at 5 million today, you cannot be the same person. And how do you hold this and hold the energy and be what you need to be today in this moment, while also knowing that you have to expand into that greatness that you're becoming and creating? It's so interesting. And I do, one of the things that you shared in your earlier brief is that we all need coaches. And I do agree with that. Mentors, a guide, and I think that now that coaching is so, I mean, honestly, it's like everybody's a coach right now. But really what that is it's being that guide, someone who has an understanding and can see those pitfalls and can see those blind spots. Even a book can be a coach or a guide if it's applied in a way of staying in that curiosity space, in staying in that, okay, what do I want? What do I value? How can I use this as a tool to move us along? And I love that. I love how you shared that and kind of got into those components. I think you've answered actually all of my questions, except what are your top books? I usually just ask for what's your number one book, but I've been so like, give me more books now. 1 to 3 books that are you'd recommend.
Really quick, I just want to highlight something that you just shared before I share my books. This concept of the paradox and holding the two polarities together, specifically around what you just said about a business leader who's like, okay, I may be a 500-person business today, whatever, let's say 1,000-person business today, but I want to get to this scale of 5,000 employees. This is part of the reason why leadership is so hard, because not only do you have to answer the call for what is here and now today, but where is your North Star? What is your goal? And part of coaching helps illuminate that journey from point A to point B and make sense of those two polarities, right? Sit in the gray of, is what I'm doing today going to help me scale? Is it also helping me answer what's here and now? And I think that's the part that's really challenging and hard.
And why it's so important to have a valuable resource like a coach or someone who's competent, who can put the hair out if it's on fire, who can also rev up the fire when in the right place when the fire needs revving, but keep it in the right place and not, yeah. And that is such an important piece. There's no question that I have been able to do things that I would not have been able to do on my own. Having the right guide, having the right mentor, having the right, and definitely coach. It gets skewed in different ways, but I think some of the things, because you have not only the coaching hours and the coaching certifications, and you understand then the nuances of within being in a business and being in how it's integrated, because it's in and then it's also out, right? And so I love that we can look at that there is a time where it's contractive and it's very focused, and then there's also that expansive energy of, okay, let's go and let's unpack this, let's pull some of this out and see, or like pull out everything from the closet and like look at it, and there's a time to put all of that away so that you can go get to work. And I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
And I'm a big proponent, like you said, that everyone needs a coach. I believe the best coaches have coaches. I
Oh
have a
yeah.
coach because I believe in service of my clients. I want to sharpen this self as instrument, if you will.
Yeah.
Because then, to your point and what you were saying a little bit earlier, then I'm not coaching in service of my client. I'm servicing and I'm coaching in service of me and my agenda. That is not the point of coaching.
Right.
I need to hold the client's agenda, not mine, when I'm coaching them.
Yeah.
And to be able to see that with clear vision it, I can only do that when I also get coaching too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of 30 years ago, even more than that, when I was studying as a therapist and I was in the chair as a therapist. And I remember there was not the kind of energy that we have now of like every therapist has a therapist, right? But now back then I remember having just being siloed. And I think that that's the biggest mistake that a leader can make, business owner, anyone can make, is to silo themselves. And I love how you've got the tools. I will say I'm an 8 in the Enneagram, like really strong 8. And as you were saying, because I do love the assessments, but I also know that it's an opportunity to look at, okay, where am I already a master at? So clearly I'm a master at challenging myself and challenging people, but how can I be more nurturing? How can I be right? And then bringing that up so that I like to call it firing on all cylinders. You said continuously, the head, the heart, being in alignment and harmony. I like to continue with the body as well, because ultimately our gut and our actions have to carry out what's in our heart and our head that should be in alignment and in harmony. So really good stuff. I love this. Do you have books that you want to share with us today?
Yeah, so I can't speak to this first one in totality because I'm currently reading it, but what I'm appreciating about it, it's called The Courage to be Disliked, the Japanese phenomenon that shows you how to change your life and achieve real happiness. I'm currently reading it, so I can't say my total review just yet. And I'm a tennis player, so I am a fan of some books that have to do with tennis. Particularly, there is a book that I have read that I've really enjoyed, and it's called The Inner Game of Tennis. And it really shows the importance of mindset. And this is why I love the sport too, because for any tennis players out there who might be listening, if we miss a point and if we let that completely sabotage our mindset, we will miss out on every subsequent point. So we have to be able to understand how to recognize an inner critic of, yep, it's here. I'm beating myself up about missing that point. And now I need to let it go because there's something new that's coming my way, a new ball, a new point, a new challenge. So I definitely do recommend that as well.
Okay, I love that. I haven't heard that book in a long time. That's an oldie. And I remember reading that, and there were some really good nuggets in the inner game of tennis. I don't know your first one. I'm excited about that. I'm definitely going to look into that. My son is learning Japanese right now, so anything Japanese culture is a good, like, oh, interesting. He's got his trip planned to Japan, and so I
Mhm.
love that. All right, this has been so insightful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your experience, your actionable strategies, like really, and also being a little vulnerable and sharing about how things were for you growing up and experiencing and how you have evolved and continue to evolve. I love that. I will, I'd love to have you share just verbally. I will also put all of your links into the show notes, but do just go ahead and share for anyone's listening right now. I know something that you wanted to share with our audience, so tell us how folks can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, other social medias like Instagram. But on my website, I do have a free downloadable guide. It's a four-step process of how to handle your inner critics. And I think that it's a really great starting point for understanding how to work with those pesky inner critics that we all have.
Indeed, I will be grabbing a copy of that. Take a look at that. Thank you so much. I will. Let's see, there's a couple other things that I was going to say. I definitely just want to make sure that our listeners, well, first, I appreciate you being here, and I know that I've walked away with some new nuances of how I look at the world and look at even myself. Thank you for that. And to everyone tuning in, if today's conversation resonated with you, please be sure to connect with Maryam and explore her work further. Leadership is a journey. Having the right tools, having the right guide Having the right support can make all the difference. Having someone definitely who also has the incredible caring spirit, clearly, that Maryam has, is fabulous. But if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Lead Stronger Longer and leave a review. It helps us bring more amazing guests like Maryam to the show. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, with strength, and remember, the best leaders don't just perform at their peak, they sustain it for the long haul. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.